Today, I'm going to tell you 13 ways that you can have a horrible, terrible, awful divorce. Number 1, hire a family law attorney and don't listen to their advice. This never ceases to amaze me. People will come in and hire an attorney, put hard-earned money on the table to get representation, and then ignore their advice. You're hiring an attorney for their expertise and their experience in the law. A lot of times the attorney that you hire will have really good knowledge about how the judge thinks or what your judge may do in a certain situation, and yet clients will often ignore what their attorney says and want to do things differently. It never makes sense to me, but if you want to have a horrible, awful, terrible divorce, don't listen to your attorney. Number 2, hire an aggressive lawyer. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, "Are you an aggressive lawyer?" And I always ask the same question back. Well, what does that mean to you? I think for a lot of people, they want a lawyer who's going to be tough, who's going to push their ex-spouse around, who's going to make them look bad. And here's the reality. The reason why having an aggressive lawyer will probably result in a horrible, awful, terrible experience is they're going to do a whole bunch of work that you probably don't need them to do, and you're going to get a bill for that. What you really want is a lawyer who's going to be strategically aggressive, someone who's going to pick the right fights and be aggressive when it's needed, not over everything. The number 3 way to have a horrible, terrible, awful divorce is to fight over absolutely every single piece of property that you own. Now I get it. You've spent a lot of time in the marriage, you've accumulated stuff, and everyone wants their fair share at the end of the day, and I'm certainly an advocate for that. But what I see people do over and over and over is fight over stuff that really doesn't have a whole lot of value. I see people fighting over pots and pans, literally. It's endless. Everyone wants to get their fair share, but they always forget that when they have their lawyers going back and forth arguing over this stuff, it's costing them money, and at the end of the day, the amount of money they spend arguing over a couple $1,000s worth of personal property gets eaten up in the attorney fees. So be smart about what you fight over. Number 4, hide or transfer marital assets to try to prevent your spouse from getting his or her fair share. I have people ask me all the time, can I transfer this piece of property to my brother? Or even worse, people will try to hide assets so that they can't be discovered. If you want to have a horrible, terrible, awful divorce, do that. But here's the reality. People are going to find it. A good attorney knows how to find assets. And if you want to make a judge mad, do something to try to purposely prevent your spouse from getting his or her fair share. It's going to cost you a whole bunch of money in attorney fees to go fight these fights. And at the end of the day, those things are going to be found anyway. Just don't do it. Number 5, get temporary custody orders and then don't exercise your parenting time. I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone insist that they get equal parenting time, but they don't really want to exercise that time. What they really want to do is they want to reduce their child support. And so we go spend the time and the money to get the temporary orders, and then they don't exercise the parenting time. What does that do? Well, it results in the other spouse getting upset. It results in more court fees, usually due to enforcement, and at the end of the day, the judge will often reduce the parenting time anyway. So if you're going to take the time and spend the money to get temporary custody orders, spend the time with your kids. Number 6, if you want to have a horrible, terrible, awful divorce, don't pay your court-ordered child support or spousal maintenance. This is a biggie. It is very common in divorce cases for one party to get temporary spousal maintenance or child support to help them get through the divorce and meet their financial needs, of course. But if you want to have a really bad experience, don't pay it. What's going to happen is that the other party is going to file an enforcement action. You're going to get drugged back in front of the judge. The judge is going to order you to pay the spousal maintenance and child support, and you'll often end up paying the other person's attorney fees as well. So if you really want to have a bad divorce experience, don't pay court-ordered spousal maintenance and child support. Number 7, and this is one of my favorites. If you want to have a really bad, awful, terrible divorce experience, send your ex-spouse vulgar text messages and emails. This is a good one. I can't tell you how many people get upset and start sending really awful things to their soon-to-be ex-spouse. But here's the thing you got to remember. This stuff always shows up in court. I have taken hundreds of pages of text messages to court over the years where one spouse has said the most awful, terrible things they can say to the other spouse, calling them the most vulgar names that you can imagine. If you think that a judge is persuaded by those types of things, you're sadly mistaken. Judges will hold those types of things against you for sure. So obviously avoid doing that. Number 8, post stupid stuff on social media. We live in a world where everybody posts just about everything that goes on in their lives on social media. Social media accounts are gold for family law attorneys. We look at that stuff all the time. I've had a number of cases where we found stuff on social media that we've been able to hold against the other party. For example, one of the things that happens in divorce cases, a preliminary injunction prevents either party from going out of state with children before the divorce is final, unless either the court allows you to do that or the other party allows you to do that. I've had many cases where somebody will take vacation pictures out of state, but they didn't tell their spouse they were taking the kids out of state. Easy to show that you're disobeying the court order when you post that on social media. Or my favorite is a soon-to-be ex-husband who doesn't want to pay spousal maintenance or child support, but goes to a strip club and is fanning out $100 bills and showing all the money he's spending on strippers. Again, pretty easy to show that this guy can afford to pay his spousal maintenance and child support. So if you want to have a really bad, terrible divorce, post stupid stuff on social media. Number 9, don't give your attorney the documents and information he or she asked for. So here's the reality. There's a lot of information that your attorney is going to need in order to represent you in the best way possible. It requires that you provide information to them. Financial information, information about property, information about your work, etc. And it's your job to give that information to your attorney. If you don't give the information to your attorney that he or she asked for, they're not going to be able to provide the best representation possible. So if you want to have a really bad, terrible, awful divorce experience, just don't give your attorney the stuff that they asked for. The number 10 way to have a horrible, terrible, awful divorce is to just refuse to settle no matter what. Dig your heels in, refuse to compromise, don't give an inch. If that's your attitude, I can almost guarantee that your divorce is going to be more expensive, you're going to go to court, and you're going to leave the fate of your case up to a judge. The whole purpose behind settling is giving you a chance to have a say in the outcome of the case. Now, it absolutely does require that you compromise. You have to give something up. It's a lot better and it's a lot cheaper to compromise than it is to spend probably thousands of more dollars to go to trial and leave it up to someone who's never going to see you again. Number 11, take unreasonable positions throughout the case. This is a biggie, and this really goes hand in hand with listening to your attorney's advice. If you want to have a really bad divorce experience, just take positions that are completely unsupportable by the law. You're going to spend a lot of money going through court, or even better, take the position that I spent 20 years earning my 401k, my wife didn't do anything but stay home with the kids, I should get 100% of my 401k because I earned it. But in Arizona, we're a community property state, and it doesn't matter who earned it. You're going to have to split community assets in most instances. So if you want to dig your heels in and take an unreasonable position and insist that you get awarded, in my example, all of that 401k, you're going to spend a lot of money, you're going to end up going to court, and the judge is still going to divide it. And even worse, there's a strong possibility if you take unreasonable positions in your case that the judge could actually order you to pay the attorney fees of the other party for dragging the case out based on your unreasonable positions. Number 12, pick the wrong fights. I have a lot of cases where somebody comes in and they're upset and they're angry at their soon-to-be ex, and sometimes for good reason. And what ends up happening is they want to spend their time proving how awful the other person is. Now, they might be awful, but here's the reality. The judge doesn't care how awful the other person is in most cases because it doesn't really have any bearing on the issues in the case. Just because your spouse may be a narcissist or may be controlling or may be demeaning to you, which are all awful things, don't get me wrong, none of that is going to allow the court to give you more property, more spousal maintenance, more child support, etc. There are certainly some circumstances where an awful spouse, someone maybe who has a substance abuse problem, would have some ramifications when it comes to custody. But if you want to focus just on how bad the other party is, or other bad fights that you can't win, you're going to have a really bad, awful divorce, and you're going to spend a lot of money and really not get anywhere. Finally, number 13, if you want to have a terrible, awful, horrible divorce experience, be disrespectful to the judge. A while back, I had a case where the other party represented himself. He got really upset in court about something that the judge said. He stood up, told the judge that she had no idea what she was talking about, that she was completely stupid. Then he turned around and walked out of the courtroom. The case wasn't over over. He had to come back to court multiple times after that for other hearings. And if you think that the judge was very favorable to him after being that disrespectful and that rude, then you would be completely wrong. If you want to have a bad divorce experience, be disrespectful to the person that's making the decisions.